Did you ever dream of building this great business and then all of a sudden you realize it kind of has become a trap to you? The very thing that you prayed for once before has now become something that is like your biggest cause of stress and regret. Well, if that's the case, or if you're somebody who's looking to start a business and you're concerned that that could actually happen to you, that's what I want to share on this podcast is why that happened, how that happens, how you can get away from it, how you can fix it. You know, I have a good friend who had a business, and you know, he's just kind of like a lot of us that were starting businesses where you do something professionally for a while, you get a skill set, and you're like, hey, why am I going to make somebody else rich when I could just do this for myself? And so you dive into that thing thinking it's going to work, and then all of a sudden you realize it's like completely consumed you. And what I really think the issue is that entrepreneurs were looking to start a business, make money, make it happen, create their business plan before they created their lifestyle plan. And what do I mean by that? Well, really the quality of our life has to do with the emotions that we experience on a consistent basis, right? And so what are your emotions based off of? Well, really your emotions are based off of your belief about the fulfillment that you're having in the key areas of your life, right? So you're thinking about things like your marriage and your kids and financial situations, the things that you can do, and you're either sitting there looking like, yeah, this is really great, I'm doing great, I'm feeling great, I'm doing well, or not. And so with an entrepreneur, oftentimes we can go and start a business and then realize that that very business that we created has now caused issues. It's now the thing that's keeping us from doing all those things that we wanted to do or being the person that we wanted to be. So what do I mean? Like, let me just give you an example, right? You may be somebody who, you were in the restaurant business, you're like this great chef for this great restaurant, whatever, and you're like, dude, why am I making just a few bucks an hour when I could actually have the restaurant? I could do this, I could do that, right? But then little do you know about what it really takes to run that business, what it really takes. Like you show up for your shift, cook, but you don't realize what it means in the back end, running the books, doing all this other stuff that it takes to like get a successful business, to the marketing, the other side. And now all of a sudden you're doing all these things, working all these crazy hours, working on stuff that you don't know about. And then the passion that you have for maybe being a chef and making food, all of a sudden it's gone. And you're trapped in this business having to work crazy hours, doing all this stuff, and you don't even like what you do anymore. And so that's the thing is it's the amount of money we have is actually not a really great indicator of our happiness. Money gives you options. I love what Alan Weiss said. Alan Weiss says that true wealth is discretionary time. That true wealth is being able to do what you want when you want, with who you want. And I've also heard it said that real wealth is like our well-being, right? Our health and our wellness. And so if you have a job or a business that you've built and that business takes away your well-being, takes away your emotional well-being, takes away your ability to do what you want with who you want, when you want, because of the restraints of it, well, now this thing that we thought was like our key to freedom has actually been the very cell that we're now locked ourselves in. And so I want to share with you a few different ideas around this. One, to maybe think about how you could reposition your business. Again, to think more of a lifestyle plan before a business plan. Or if you're thinking about starting a business, these are very important things for you to be thinking about before you start your business, okay? So the first thing is, like I mentioned, you don't want to just think about the money first. You don't want to just think about like, oh, I'm getting this business to make this money and we'll figure out all the other stuff later. Because whatever you're doing and whatever you build to create that, you're now kind of stuck to it, right? So I mentioned, briefly my friend who built a service-based business. And his business was a propane company, so it was very tied to a geographical area. There's a certain service area, everything was there. So this particular person, he loved to travel, he loved to go around, go here, go there. He actually, in his being, he's a very spontaneous person. Somebody who wants to live a very spontaneous life, but he built a business that was anything but spontaneous. Like the hours, the location, the team, all the stuff was very rigid. So all of a sudden, like the thing that he built was actually stopping him from living the life that he really wanted to live. And so a lot of times you get stuck there, right? So don't be thinking about, oh, is this a great way to make money? There's a million different ways to make money, but you want to figure out, how do I make money in a way that's going to complement my lifestyle, going to complement what I want to do, right? So there's a great saying that actually I thought of this when I started my company, and I said, I want my business to support my lifestyle, not my lifestyle to support my business, right? So the first thing you got to figure out is, okay, like we're talking about, if you want to be spontaneous, if you want to be able to travel, you want to be able to go wherever you want, you want to be able to go on spontaneous trips, you want to be able to go spend a month in overseas or go to Hawaii, you do this, do that, then having a physical location business that requires your presence is not a good idea. Right? You want to think about maybe more of like an online business, something that can be done virtually, something can be done, via Zoom calls, or building a business that like more runs on its own without like your hands on it all the time. And so let's talk about a few different lifestyle factors. I'm looking at my notes here. I'll just start going on all these tangents. Right? So there's some key factors to consider before starting a business, right? So these are like the questions that you want to ask yourself. Now, if you already got a business, you want to be asking yourself these questions because you're going to find kind of the place that you realize you're missing it, okay? So time and work-life balance. So let's just ask this question. Like, do you want to work nights and weekends, right? Like, that's a big question. So think about this. If you got kids in school, and so they're in school Monday through Friday, they got sports, so like that whole traditional, working block, 9 to 5, 9 to 7, whatever else, it's like eaten up for your kids between that time, right? So your kids are completely busy during that time. But then again, this restaurant example, you decide that you're going to start a restaurant business. But wait, a restaurant is most busy typically in the evenings and on the weekends. So now your free time is when your kids are busy, and then when your kids are free, you're busy. Well, you got to ask a question, is that the lifestyle that you want? Do you want to have a life where you really don't see them too much? You don't really engage with them too much because you've got this like off schedule. Well, if that's a no, then starting a restaurant would be a very unfulfilling business to step into when you're missing that, right? So another question, do you want to be able to take time off without your business suffering? Right, that's a great question. Do you want, if you decide to step away or you decide to go somewhere else, will your business suffer? Right, most of us are going to say no. Like, we want to be able to take time off, do stuff, right? Well, then there's certain businesses that are more you focus. So for instance, let's say you're like a consultant and you're like a one-on-one consultant, or you have that type of thing. You're getting paid for your ability to consult with your client, right? And so if you're doing that one-on-one and that's the only way you make money, well, then if you're not having that one-on-one time, let's say like a personal trainer, right? Like if you're a personal trainer, your ability to personal train, right? Like your ability to stand next to your client, to get them to lift weights and run and do all that stuff, that's how you get paid. Well, if that's the business that you've built, then if you go and leave for a month, you're not getting paid because you're not standing next to your client anymore, right? So like, let me give an alternative to that. And I am going to try to provide some examples that are alternatives to that, right? So if you're a personal trainer, well, what if you recorded a bunch of different workout plans and different systems and sold them online? That's obviously super popular right now. There's a ton of them out there. And if you see a ton of them out there, it's because they're working. And so, yeah, maybe you're making less per money, right? Instead of making, a few thousand or whatever it is, a few $100 a month by these clients you're doing one-on-one stuff, maybe you're making $40, $50 a month. So you need more clients, but it has nothing to do with you. That is separate. You can record that. You can have that ready. People can be walking through the program at their home, doing it virtually, right? Or even if you did more intimate, like group coaching, where you're doing live Zooms or things like that, you could go to Italy and go fire up a stream and do your thing, and it's being broadcast all over the world. Your physical presence isn't required to make that happen. And that's a big difference. So like if you are somebody who is in the things that I'm talking about, like you are a personal trainer and you're like, yeah, actually, I didn't realize how like that was going to wear me down so bad. Well, then what you got to think of is, how do I start to make the shift? So if you are, again, I'm just using personal training, but that applies to like a million different things. But then start to make some virtual stuff. Start to make some video things. Start to upsell some add-ons. Maybe, if a customer is going to leave you and, because they can't afford it or whatever, be like, well, hey, how about you pay $20 a month and you get access to this, right? And you start to bridge some of your finances, some of the revenue over to a more virtual thing. And then that's how you start to build that up. And then when that virtual stuff starts to outweigh the personal stuff, you can start to abandon that. Or another thing is, if you're making a bunch of money doing the virtual stuff, then your one-on-one time, you should think of it as more of like a VIP experience and start to charge more, right? Start to charge more for that one-on-one time, okay? Another question about work-life balance, okay? So is this an actual scalable business, or is it just a demanding job? And that was my example. I was in that kind of space, right, where like I was running digital marketing, running agencies, and then I had to feel, I'm like, I can do this, right? So I went out on my own, and at first it was me, just a couple people, and so I was doing so much of the marketing myself. And what I realized was, yes, I did increase my salary, actually about 3x'd what I was making at my previous job in my business in a matter of like a month. So that was amazing, to basically triple your income. But I quickly realized all I did was own a job. I'm doing the same stuff I was doing before. Actually, before I was managing a team of 15 people. Now I'm like doing all the work again. So in some ways I kind of went backwards, and I'm now the doer of all the work. Yes, I'm making more money, but there's no way to scale this. If I keep doing what I'm doing, I can't double my income again because I just don't have enough hours, right? So then I had to start thinking about, okay, how do I hire? How do I train people? How do I become more of a manager and a business owner and put those people in place? And then that's a completely different job, right? That's a completely different job than doing it. And that's why most businesses fail. I know I'm kind of throwing a bunch of stuff out there, but most businesses fail because the guy who's been roofing for 10 years says, I don't know why I get paid an hourly rate to roof. I could do what the owner does. I'm going to go start my own roofing business. And what they don't realize is that roofing, the actual act of roofing a house, has very little to do with being a successful business, right? Because think about it. How many people know how to roof a house? There's tons. But how many people know how to get a new customer? How to write a proposal, how to get somebody to pay, how to have the right insurance in place, how to hire and manage a team, how to make sure they show up on time, make sure the work's done right, make sure, like, all the different like components of running a business is actually what makes a successful business. I've heard this saying before, there's a big difference between Joe the plumber and Joe's plumbing. Joe the plumber is a single guy whose wife maybe does the dispatching, takes the calls, schedules the work, and he works long days and busts it. He makes a couple $100,000 a year, and it's better than being employed. But he owns his job, and he has to work really hard. And if he decides not to show up and not to work and go on vacation and do anything, he's not getting paid. And sure, is it better than being employed by somebody? Okay. In some ways, yeah. If you're not getting the business and you're not getting paid, that might not be better. And so it can be a lot more stressful. You got to do it. You got to go to those calls. You got to do everything, right? And so that's Joe the plumber. Joe's plumbing, however, can be like a 20, truck company with GM and managers and a whole series of plumbers. And Joe, who owns that plumbing company, doesn't need to know one thing about plumbing. He doesn't. He doesn't need to know how to do any plumbing at all. What he needs to know is how to hire the right people, how to lead managers, how to manage cash flow, how to hire, how to fire, how to train, how to market. Completely different set of skills. And so that's a huge component if you're thinking about getting into business, or if you are in business and you're wondering why you're stuck. Like you're like, hey, like I know what I'm doing. I do good work. I get good reviews. Why can't I grow? It's because you only know how to do your trade. You don't know how to do business. And there's a huge difference between that. All right, let's move on to the next factor, location freedom. I've already mentioned this quite a few times, but if you create a business Again, even talking about a plumbing business, right? And you've got all your marketing, all your stuff, and you're in a specific geographical area. If you leave that geographical area for whatever reason, vacation, you want to go move somewhere else, you want to be spontaneous, you want to travel, like if you're not like Joe's Plumbing that has the whole team and the operations and everybody can go run and go do all that stuff, your business is going to shut down, right? And so if you do want to be what we call a solopreneur or a boutique business where you get maybe a few contractors or a small team, and you want to be able to go to different places and you want to be able to go to make money, you have to have a business that supports that, right? So we're talking digital businesses would be a really good choice, right? So whether it's e-commerce businesses, whether it's doing virtual consulting, whether it's or even like building physical products, shipping physical products, right? Like that could be another thing. If you're not running your warehouse, you're outsourcing your warehouse, you could build products. It's not tied to the brick and mortar, right? And even like that, if you're going to sell things, right? Let's say you want to be a retailer. Well, there's a huge difference between having a brick and mortar downtown in a very expensive rent space than it is to having an e-commerce store online. Huge difference. Right? Sure, the brick and mortar, you build relationships locally, you get a lot of referrals, you get all the foot traffic of people walking by their favorite coffee shop, and and that's some advantages to that. And if you're somebody who wants to be you love your town, you don't really want to leave your town, you want to be a real asset to the town, build relationships, do all that stuff, great. That's awesome. But if you want somebody who wants flexibility, you want to be able to scale, you want to be able to do certain things, well, instead of doing brick and mortar retail, why don't you do online retail? Why don't you build an e-commerce store? Why don't you start to market and build the systems and all those things, and then you're not time sensitive or not location sensitive, right? All right, let's talk about financial considerations, okay? How much do you actually need to make your ideal life, right? So that's one thing. If you're starting your lifestyle plan, right, and that's the whole idea. We sit there and start our lifestyle plan. This is the lifestyle I want. This is the where I want to be able to go. This is what I want to be able to do. This is the flow I want to have. These are the schools I want my kid to go to. This is all this different stuff. Well, then what is the cash flow required to do that? And then will your business generate that sort of predictable cash flow, right? And or what does your business need to do in order to create that predictable cash flow, right? And so that's a big component when you're first getting started out. If I'm somebody who's again, like in marketing consulting, for me to be running full service marketing for somebody, one of the things that was a great advantage to it was the cash flow, right? Because I was able to start making $8,000 a month per client very easily. I still have 2 clients that I signed within the first couple months of starting my business that still work with me 8 years later. So you're talking at least, an average of $8K a month for 8 years, that consistent, that's a good amount of cash flow. Right? Now, again, I had the scalability problem. Now, that would have been a lot different than, let's say, if I started out right out of the gate and instead of doing services, what I decided I was going to do was sell a digital product about online marketing. Now, that's great because that thing is infinitely scalable, right? My time's not required. If you sell 10 million, it could be the same as selling 10,000, right? Maybe your hosting's a little bit more expensive. But the problem was, what would it predictably take? How many customers would I need to make that same amount of money and making $8,000 a month day one, right? To make that money immediately. And so those are the balances. And that's why with a lot of this stuff, and I am showing you both sides of it, because it's not even necessarily that one side's right, one side's wrong. It's that there are advantages to one side and disadvantages on both sides. And oftentimes what you're going to find yourself is doing a hybrid approach. Right? So when I maxed out my time being a marketing consultant, I realized right away, I'm like, wait a minute, I need to be able to figure out how to make money that's not tied to my time. Okay, what do? Well, you can hire some people, right? I can start selling these types of projects, hire a writer, they do 90% of the work. Woo, now that's given me a scale. Yeah, but you know what? There's only so many writers I can have, or do I really want to manage a 50-person team? Well, then you start thinking, okay, well, what kind of software maybe could I develop, or what kind of training things? And so you're still taking your expertise, but you're wrapping it in a different model, and you're starting to bridge it over. And then you look at your revenue streams, and you have service revenue, you have affiliate revenue, you have software revenue, you have extra revenue from contractors, and all these little mix, and you start to develop your business in a way that's hitting your financial goals, but also doing it in the way that you want to live your life. Does that make sense? So with a lot of the stuff we're talking about, you're going to have these hybrid approaches, and things are going to change, and there's going to be a flow, and there's going to be stuff that's different, right? All right, number 4, stress, clients, bureaucracy, right? What kind of customers do you want to deal with? That was another thing I did when I started off my business, this one. Now, mind you, this wasn't the first business that I started. Excuse me. This wasn't the first business that I started. I had buried many businesses before. And so I got to taste a little bit of what it meant in different areas, right? And so I had 2 main things that I wanted to be sure about when I started my business. The first I already mentioned, but I'll repeat it, was that my business must support my lifestyle support my business. And then the second thing was that I want to do work that I love, with people I love, for people I love. And that might sound a little ooey gooey, but I'm going to tell you, for the quality of life, it matters, right? The work that I do, I want to like. And I like it. I like the idea of storytelling and strategy and automation and watching businesses grow and all that stuff. I like that. I love it. And I want to do it with people I love. So that meant if I'm hiring a contractor or an employee or somebody, I want to like that person, love that person, have an affinity for that person. It's so much easier to work that way. Now, has that always been the case? Well, no. Sometimes you need some help and you find out that you don't love them as much as other people and you got to make some changes. But life's too short to work with people that you can't stand, right? Like, so you can be intentional about creating a team where there's unity and camaraderie and, just kind of like a good flow. And to be honest, if you've got a business full of people that you can't stand and they don't like you, what does that do for the quality of your life? It's not great. And then I want to do it for people I love. And for me, I love entrepreneurs. I love people who are willing to take risks to try to give their family a better life, to see more, to have more. And so it's a passion of mine to want to get behind their mission, right? So you got to figure out what is your model, what is your saying, like what kind of customers do you want to be dealing with, right? Is this business have massive government oversight and regulations and licensing and all that stuff? Like, man, I couldn't imagine. I got a buddy of mine from church who's into construction and building things, and just the licensing and the permitting and all the other stuff. Like, I don't know. That to me just would drive me nuts. So you got to just figure out there's a big difference in the people you're serving, the flow, the stress, the clients, all the different things. So you just got to realize what's your stress threshold, what's going to wear you out, how can I build things in a way that's going to make sense. All right, and then consideration number 5. I've been kind of alluding to this many different times, but the idea of, do you want a team or do you want a solo operation? Or even do you want employees or do you want to work with contractors? Again, I'm not going to give legal, financial advice, anything like that, so talk to your CPAs and things like that. But I'm going to say the difference between having W-2 employees and 1099 contractors is a major difference. There's a major difference in what's legal, and again, your state's going to depend huge on this, like what the requirements are to hire someone, to fire someone, to let somebody go. Like you could just be like, yeah, I'm going to get a W-2 employee and this and that, and then all of a sudden you realize there's all these different things in your state and different stuff, and it's like, I can't just let them go. I got to do this, and I'm sure you need to think about that ahead of time, and then you need to go and figure out what you need to do to get that done. Now, I will say this about a team. So even if you're a solo operator, right, solo business, you're a solopreneur, you need a team. You need a team. And what do I mean by that? Like, for me, I try to do all my taxes and finances and all that stuff on my own. And that sucked the life out of me. I hated that type of stuff. I hated doing it. I wasn't good at it. I made a bunch of mistakes. It caused issues. And so I didn't take the advice, like, why didn't I just get a CPA and a bookkeeper right away? All right, that would have saved me so much time, so much trouble, and I could have focused on what I did. So you're thinking banking, lawyers, CPAs, bookkeepers, technology providers. I mean, there's, obviously each business is going to have vendors, contractors, all this stuff. Like even if you are a solopreneur, you have no W-2 employees, there's nobody who works for you, having the team around you that you know you can get the right information or get certain things done and you can focus on what you do best is super important. But that's a big difference, right? Like if you don't want to manage a lot of people, building a huge construction business with, with all the work, all the stuff, all the things, like that could be a huge headache for people. And again, then your business, what you do is you manage people. Now, if you're somebody who loves to manage people and you love that, then maybe that's exactly the kind of business. Why is the advantages of that? Well, the advantages is everybody else does all the work and you're just managing the people. And if you like to manage people and you enjoy that and you like developing people, that could be a great idea, right? But if you're somebody who, again, wants to be more spontaneous, wants to have more of like a flow to life, not be, stuck to meetings and this and that, then that kind of thing doesn't work because people need you and you need to be available for people, right? And there's going to be a balance between those types of things, but that's very important to be thinking about, okay? So those are just a few of the considerations. We haven't even talked about some just like the personal things, like where do you want to live? Like, where do you want to live? Do you want to live by the ocean? Do you want to live in the mountains? Do you want to live, like all of those different things that you want about your life are going to impact the type of business you could be. And again, the whole point of this video is really to help you be intentional about thinking about, wait a minute, what is the quality of life that I want? What is the flow of life that I want? And am I building a business that supports that lifestyle, or am I building a business that's actually in the way of that, that's stopping me from doing the things that I want to do, right? So here is some recommendations for what you can do and you can start, okay? So number one, what is the ideal daily routine? What is your ideal daily routine? Like, what do you want your day-to-day flow of life to be like? When do you want to wake up? What do you want to wake up to? What do you want to do in the first couple hours of your day? What do you want? What do you want to do? So you think about it, like that's actually the quality of life. This isn't even about the money. It's like that I get to do the things I want to do. I get to do it with the people I want to do, and I get to do it when I want to do it. That is really the quality of life. So what does that look like? Right? Dream a little. What do you want it to be? And then write down, what are your non-negotiables? Like I mentioned the family time thing. That was one of the things when I started my business was I wanted to be able to eat every meal with my children. I wanted to be able to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner with my kids. Our kids were homeschooled. I worked from home, and that was actually intentional. I wanted to be there. I wanted to be a present father. I wanted to be able to eat every meal with my children. I wanted to be able to coach my son's soccer team. I wanted to be able to go to every recital my daughter had. I want to be able to do everything with them. And that was one of the main drivers of why I started my business. So for me, doing digital marketing, being an online consultant, being very flexible with my schedule, those kind of things, totally supported those things. So what do you need? What do you need for family time? What are your non-negotiables around travel and vacations and income and stress tolerance and all this different stuff that we've been talking about? What are just the non-negotiables? Okay? And then when you have those two things, this is the way I want the daily flow of my life to be. This is the non-negotiables. This is like the parameters for things. Then work backwards. So start to think about, okay, well, what kind of business would make sense? Like even some of the big things we're talking about, like is brick and mortar or digital kind of like a big thing? Am I going to work with like a kind of a small team and contractors, or do I need to employ a bunch of people? Am I going to be focused more on the doing of the job, or do I have to like manage people? Like you just start to fit these little blocks in, and then you kind of validate this business model versus your lifestyle model, right? Your lifestyle plan to your business plan. And in fact, you could kind of do the same thing. Like you could say, if I started this business, and if this business was making, whatever, $1.5 million a year in revenue, what would it take to run that business? Who would I need? What would be the things that I did every day? What would be that? And you literally lay those out next to each other, and then you look and you say, wait a minute, is there a match between the life I want to live and what this successful business would be? Maybe not, don't look at the business right away. Obviously, if your goal is to be somewhere, think about being that place, and then what does it look like? Measure them against each other and be like, Is this the type of business that I want? Okay. So I think that would be a really great exercise to walk through that, and again, I had, it was about 12 years ago, I started a program called Intent Man, and I was walking quite a few early 20-year-olds through this process. And we were talking about this kind of stuff, about lifestyle and things like that. And there was one young man that I got to mentor that at the time, he had many different goals about his life and what he wanted to do. And then he really looked at this and he realized, I remember one of his core identity traits, he called himself an adventurer, which meant that he needed to be able to travel and go here and do all this other stuff. And that really impacted what he wanted to do. In fact, it's funny, I gave him all this advice. I was actually the director of a department at that time. And he left that company in order to do the things that I was kind of coaching on. That's fine. I want people to be successful. I don't want them to be stuck with me. I want them to go live out the fullness. And man, this young man, he took it to heart. Within just a couple years, he had lived in, I can't remember all the places, but I know it was in Germany and Italy and Argentina and Colombia and Brazil, and went all over the world and built this digital nomad business. And he was able to build a business that supports lifestyle, but it was only because he took time to first figure out, who do I want to be? What do I want to do? Where do I want to go? And then that made sense. Not, what can I do to make money? Because that's what most people think about when they start a business. What can I do to make money? Well, if I did that, I'd make money. And they don't lay it out of what it's going to look like if they actually are successful. And then the very thing that you prayed for becomes the very thing that you're praying to get out of, right? And like I mentioned earlier, I've had other examples where friends where they kind of did that. How can I make some money? It became successful, and then they didn't quite have the life that they wanted to, and they had to figure out how to get out of it, right? So let me give you a little next step. Again, go through that list all the things to do on both sides, start to compare that, start to look at that, and then basically develop a lifestyle plan and develop a business plan. And if you already have a business, start to look at your current business and say, okay, if this is where I'm at now, right? I'm not suggesting that you just blow up your business, get rid of it, this and that, but just think about, how can I start to build hybrid approaches to start to go over here? How can I build things that take the parts of my business I don't like and make them more desirable, and bit by bit start to move them over, okay? Now, if you like this content, you like hearing some of the stuff, you want to get some more of it, go to billyrobbins.com/newsletter. I will be sharing some very specific or unique content on the newsletter, rather, some trainings, different things, just for people who are a part of the newsletter. So I just thank you so much for watching this video. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. If you're watching on a podcast, subscribe. Push the buttons, do the things. Go to billyrobbins.com/newsletter, subscribe there, and we'll see you on the next one. So thank you so much for your time. All right, guys, take care. God bless.